And the unfortunate thing is I still dress like a banker, even though I don't work for a bank anymore. So I'm going to speak reasonably fast, because I thought this was a 45-minute slot. So you can always watch me on the recording and slow me down if I'm too fast. But the major thing that I'm doing here is I'm talking about how I went to work for a vendor, and when I was at that vendor, because CISOs, we're supposed to know what the business does. A lot of CISOs don't. Right? They sit in the basement, they buy tools, don't talk to the business. But I actually had to learn what our company did. And when I learned what our company did, I actually learned that it had some utility to what I do day to day. So the first thing is, I'm not that James Blake, and I'm not that James Blake. Right? Sometimes I get upgrades when I go to hotels and things like that. I also get mistaken for this chap. So I was on a flight, I had to give a signature. Imagine the disappointment where I didn't sign it Heston Blumenthal, I signed it Heston Services. So they get back, they're going to be terribly disappointed when they read it. So who are Rubrik? Just quickly, because you need to understand the kind of organization I work for. So we're a Silicon Valley unicorn, so valued over $1 billion. We're pre-IPO. Microsoft recently acquired 10% of us about 3 or 4 months ago. We're largely ex-Googlers. Because we all deal with file systems, right? So quick indexing of file systems, kind of Google were the pioneers of that. So about 2,000 people. We have offices all around the world, but we have lots and lots and lots of serious customers. Agencies, almost every blue chip you can think about in America and in the UK that we do. And what do? We do data management. Backup and recovery, exciting, hey? But actually, it has become exciting because 2 things have happened, right? So legacy data management vendors, which pretend to be tape silos, very complicated job schedules and things like this, definitely not sexy, right? But people have started to move to the cloud. They have hybrid infrastructures that contain containers. They have virtual environments and things like that. So there is really a space for a new kind of backup vendor that can handle those kind of hybrid environments and simplify things. And people moving to the cloud, one of the ways they can do it is back up, and this becomes important for a security use case, back up their on-premise infrastructure and then just lift it up in the cloud, like restore it in the cloud. So a lot of data migrations and cloud migrations happen that way. But the other thing that has made backup sexy again, I need a red cap, make backup sexy again, is ransomware, right? Everyone says the final thing is in a ransomware attack, the last line of defense is backup and recovery. And we've seen a lot of people and a lot of malware vendors actually targeting the backup and recovery systems that are there. So we've actually had to work on that quite a lot. But it's still not sexy. On its own, you go and talk to a CISO about backup and recovery, he'll go, that's IT's problem, not my problem. But from a cyber resiliency perspective, look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, the 5 functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Recover is in there, right? It's like availability is a part of a CISO's responsibility, but it usually sits in someone in facilities or someone in IT who manages BC and DR. But I'm going to say something highly controversial. It's not sexy, but BC and DR is more mature than the way we run cybersecurity. Like, look at the difficulties most of us have getting visibility of assets. It was just spoken about in the last session. I've worked with many organizations. They know 3 to 30% of their assets. And they have some mythical CMDB project that takes 20 years to deploy. And by the time it's deployed, they've moved to another way of delivering IT, and the CMDB's out of date. So, but actually, we can learn a lot from BCDR. We say we don't know the importance of assets in the business. Look at the BIA. Someone else has already done your risk assessment for impact, and then, oh no, we have to stand up a cyber risk program completely on its own with its own people. Collaboration between, and this is what I'm really seeing ransomware has driven, collaboration between IT and security in more of a resiliency mindset. So am I going to pitch our product? Nope. right? So I'm not interested in it. I'm not commercial. I'm an ops guy, right? I just run security. What I am going to talk about generically is how backup can help us, not just at recovery, but at other stages of cyber resilience. But I've got to start by talking about the problem that we face. So I see ransomware not as a cause. It's a bit like if you've got a cough, you've got a sneeze, you've got a headache, and you've lost your taste. That's a symptom, right? The problem is COVID, right? If you can't continue your business after a cyber attack, that is a symptom, and the cause is bad cyber resiliency, right? And so we need to focus not just on recovery, because recovery is rebuilding from rubble, right? Resilience is the ability to withstand that attack at a degraded level, but to continue serving business. So we had a customer, ERP systems encrypted, 5 o'clock in the morning, needed to open up their offices. They were building supply company in Australia, actually the equivalent B&Q over here. Recovered, started business again 7 o'clock in the morning. All logistics systems, all billing systems and things like that. That's resilience, right? Bit of effort, a lot of operational effort, panicking, getting CISOs up at 1 o'clock in the morning with P1, at 6 o'clock in the morning with P1 incidents, but that's resilience. So this is the security model we're all used to, right? Walls and moats, right? And we build the walls higher and we built the moats wider, and the adversary has first mover advantage. So threat intelligence, we've been driving home threat intelligence is really important. I used to run the program just across the road, that way, JP Morgan, right? So I built threat intelligence function there, as a part of the integration with the other components. But we can only learn what they're doing after they've done it, right? So if they think of a new way of doing things, there's always a lag. There's always a period where our defensive and protective controls won't work properly. And as soon as we build those walls higher and the moats wider, they build better boats. They build better siege engines or Trojan horses. They attack our people and our processes, which our technical controls cannot avoid. So, the social engineering elements of business email compromise, of getting that initial access vector, or people share passwords and they use initial access brokers to get in. So the reality is, we can't keep telling the business that we can stop attacks, right? We have to have an adult conversation at some point. And we're all used to this. I hate this, but everyone does it. Even the British Army does it. A 5x5 matrix, where we have an ordinal scale of risk and likelihood. The fact you can't times two ordinals together, it breaks maths, right? And we really should do it in a much more quantitatively way, but I'm not going to moan. Most of us do this. And this is, what we're used to. But we spend, on average, 85 to 95% of our budgets on likelihood reduction. We spend about 5 to 10% of our budgets on impact reduction, right? And ransomware has shown us impacts can be quite high. So the way I look at it, it's a cardboard tank, right? We're spending all this money on likelihood reduction, and all we're doing is we're making it slightly faster, slightly harder to hit, but when you hit it, it completely destroys it, right? It causes unbelievable amounts of damage. And I spent 20 years building SOCs. I built 91 SOCs as a consultant for Apple, Microsoft, Walmart, Rolls-Royce, Bombardier, Shell, lots and lots of different companies. And, this is an ops guy, SecOps guy, telling you we need to focus on impact, right? Because we are losing the prevention and detection battle, but that doesn't mean we need to lose the overall battle. And, I was at InfoSec. I've been at InfoSec for 4 days meeting our customers. And, the amount of signs I saw above vendors going, automate everything, right? I did my PhD in machine learning, well, not machine learning, in linear regression for anomaly detection when we called it mass, not artificial intelligence, right? So there's an awful lot of vendor FUD and things like that. But the amount of people I had there just said, we stop ransomware. And I'm kind of going, well, my company make a lot of money helping customers recover from ransomware, and we're a unicorn and you're a startup. So I think you're not protecting people from ransomware, right? And it's just telling people you're doing that sets the wrong impression. So the way I look at the anti-malware vendors that are now anti-ransomware vendors is lipstick on a pig, right? It's the same thing. Because we know, because talking to CISO, one of the big 4 banks we have a regular catch-up. And he's going, what do you think of this anti-malware solution that we've got that's now calling itself anti-ransomware? And I'm like, well, do you get malware incidents? He's like, yeah, all the time. Get about 100 a week. So what makes you think when the attack vectors on the MITRE attack framework that cause it, the only difference with ransomware is the monetization at the end of it, right? So I'm like, what makes you think this vendor that hasn't protected you for the last 5 years is suddenly going to protect you from ransomware? Marketing? I don't know. Good lunches? All the other things vendors take you out for? So with that in mind, as a CISO, we are stuck in this mindset. If we don't spend our budgets, we lose it. And there are too many CISOs, people in my role, who believe and count their value not by their operational capability, but by how many bodies they have in front of them and under them in the organization and what their budget is, not how good they are at managing the risk to an organization. I think I'm a better CISO if I run a small team, an efficient team, and we have fewer products and we protect the business from more, right? But that isn't the mentality of most CISOs. They're on this hamster wheel of, well, we're going to have our audit in September and see how our controls are doing. So we're going to identify the gaps. Let's do a risk assessment, maybe October. And then back December, we'll do a gap analysis, work out what controls we're missing. And then we'll send an RFI out to all those vendors because we need to spend the budget. And we need to put the budget in for next year before the end of April. So then we down select a vendor. 4 or 5 vendors, I'm going to go with them. Then I'm going to do proof of concepts with those vendors. Then we get to July and we bought the product. Then we get to August and we've installed it. And then the whole hamster wheel starts again. How well integrated, how well operationalized do you think those controls are? Because we're already buying our next one next year, right? And when the rest of the organization is moving to the cloud and is reducing infrastructure and focusing on the core mission, IT's core mission, IT have become brokers, not custodians of systems. Right? They've become much more efficient, much more business-focused, and at the same time, security are building controls that have dubious quality to the business, sat in a basement, not talking to the business, and building out infrastructure and huge teams. I had 650 people across the road. So, this is what CISO looks like today. It's not me, unfortunately. I couldn't cut my head out sufficiently. But the average enterprise has 130 different security controls deployed. Right? A lot of them overlapping, and that figure comes from Deloitte. And then a figure that came from a network and endpoint security vendor. 75% of the people that are paying ransoms have up-to-date endpoint and network tools in place, right? Going back to something is broken, right? Something is very, very broken in what we do. It's normally at that point I drop the mic, walk off stage, and leave the CISOs, their mouths open. Please tell me what we're doing wrong. But what does it look like? Our budget's going up. Our headcount's going up. Complexity is going up. And if you look at resilience, what is one of the components that is a major enemy of resilience? Complexity, licensing, attack surface, all of these endpoint security tools, and we've seen this, where either IT or security tools are being leveraged as a living off the land attack. The more tools we put at the endpoint, the more adversaries might be able to use them, the more vulnerabilities may exist in those tools, and also the more friction we create against users. We slow down their machines, it's another thing for them to manage, it stops working, it gets in the way of their business. And most importantly, since the geopolitical situation in Eastern Europe, and also since COVID, reduced agility. Right? And we live in a very uncertain world at the moment, and having a bunch of controls that rigidly stick the business in one in particular direction is not where we need to be if we want to align with the business. So this comes from, these are my stats. So as I mentioned earlier, I used to build SOCs. So I used to have a team, I would parachute 6 people into a customer, I would do an analysis of what they need from a business perspective, from a risk perspective. The biggest constraints, however, were political and cultural within the organization. We'd assess that, right? So when I go in and build a SOC, 2 years it would take. We'd run it for a couple of years, train their team, recruit their team, hand it over to them. And so to do that, I had to understand what is the raw material I'm dealing with. So it's basically a CMMI level. You'll see it in the bottom right over there. 0, no capability. 1, ad hoc. 2, documented. 3, measured. 4, they're improving things with that measurement. 5, they can add dollar signs to every person, every control, and things like this. So when I started this practice in 2011, these are the biggest companies in the world, right? And hundreds of assessments. 1.22, somewhere between ad hoc and documented. That was their capability. And these are just US figures because I wanted to attach US figures to the scores for US organizations. And the US was spending $30 billion. Fast forward nearly a decade when I left the practice, we had gone up 6.9% in capability, but we'd over doubled our spending on cybersecurity. There's no linear correlation between spending and the actual operational capability your organization has. And I say that having worked for a company where our typical answer to any problems was to back articulated lorries full of dollars on top of it and then bury the problem under money, right? Like we could buy anything we want or any number of people that we wanted. But what we actually noted above a certain base level of hygiene, adding extra people and adding extra tools doesn't really move the needle much. And in fact, sometimes it makes it worse, right? It's time to reset to a certain degree. So my life before ransomware as a CISO was great. I had to worry about 3 things, right? First thing, reputational damage. This is the one that every vendor taking me out for a lovely lunch or playing golf or to the cricket, because I don't like Formula 1 or soccer, they would take me out and they would say, reputation of your company, and all the CISOs that take the board, pictures, clippings of websites and news stories. It's them selling by FUD and vendors selling to us by FUD. Talk, they're out of business, aren't they? JP Morgan, we had a breach in 2014. Home Depot, Target, you never heard of these companies anymore, do you? Share price recovers within a year to 2 years for all companies, no matter how catastrophically bad they handle the cybersecurity thing. So the reputational damage, we used to use that as a way of selling and getting a bit more money. You don't like being the press, do you? Litigation, getting sued by people, especially in the US, big one, class action lawsuits. It's not just the lawsuit, it's the fact the e-discovery for the lawsuit discloses all your internal business processes, things like that, and regulatory fines. GDPR is a big one. So we kind of had this, 5x5 matrix that's over there. Ransomware comes along, now the business can't deliver its mission. Slightly different risk, right? And that risk is the CIO is used to holding it. A business continuity incident, a massive downtime caused by misconfiguration or something like that. And actually, we have to reset our matrices to add a whole new set of impact that we're not used to as CISOs, right? So the world has got a lot more complicated for CISOs. And then effectively, the difference between these losses is they're largely sunk. Secondary losses, even if you really, really, really make a mess of the incident response, they don't tend to get worse. You've already lost that number of records. You've already, had the bad management of security that let that incident happen in the first place. However, these losses get worse minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. And last speaker talked about $500,000 an hour and things like that. I was at Saudi Aramco as an incident responder to build their SOC so the incident responders could do it when the Shamoon wiper attack wiped 34,000 servers there, right? And I saw a lot of the mistakes that were described before in organizations that I've been in as an incident responder. And, another stat from a vendor there, but about a third of organizations that have ransomware attacks lose a C-level. Colonial Pipeline lost their CIO. And, so we're setting this expectation, give me more money. We come up with our begging bowl every year. If only I had more people, if only I had more money. And we're setting this expectation with enough money and with enough people, we can protect the business from everything. That is the wrong thing. We need to have an adult conversation about, shoplifting is a sunk cost for retail. if you connect your business to the internet, there are going to be cyber losses. What we need to do is not just talk about preventing them and detecting them, but also the ability to withstand those attacks as we go forward. And so the interesting situation I find myself in as a CISO during ransomware is I'm now holding the toilet chain. The business go, it's a cyber incident, but all the plumbing is provided by the IT department to actually manage that impact, right? Which is not a situation I like being in, especially in most organizations where IT and security are like this. And then we look at the NIST cybersecurity framework. So identify. This belongs to both. Right? The identify section in this cybersecurity framework, know your assets. I already alluded to, no one knows where their assets are, right? All of them anyway. And even if they know their assets, they know where hardware and software is. Now, hardware and software is cattle today. You know, Puppet, Chef, cloud instances, Kubernetes. I can set up and rebuild software infrastructure or have a cloud version of hardware infrastructure in seconds. The thing that matters is the data. How many people have their data in their asset register? Okay, you know, it's kind of like that. And it's the IT department that own where those assets are and what they do. So we are dependent on the IT one, but once we know where those assets are, we can do a risk assessment. And as I alluded to earlier, if we take a business continuity perspective, the business impact analysis is really useful because the BIA describes in what order we're going to bring things up, and it describes the whole IT value chain. So I'm not going to describe how many servers we have, but I had to look at our Swift value chain when I worked for a bank, and I had to work up all the upstream systems, the sanction screening, the anti-fraud, and all the systems that send those Swift instructions down. They all need to be up for us to deliver Swift payments, right? And the BIA gives you that, but we don't do that. We then go and ask exactly the same questions to the owners of those assets that IT have already asked them for the BIA, and we duplicate effort. So it's a really good place to use those. And then prevention and detection. Already talked about this, you know, ad nauseum, so I'm not going to talk about that much more, but owned by the CISO. Then we come to response. So this tends to be a joint effort, right? So if I look at badly managed response to wiper and ransomware incidents. So what happens is they recover systems with vulnerabilities, recover systems with the artifacts from the attack, and the machines just get reinfected again, and they're just stuck in this cycle. So there needs to be this close relationship there. And then recover, that sits there, and it usually looks like that. Right? We've got all these wonderful systems. We throw a hand grenade, text ticket, ServiceNow ticket, Jira ticket, IT recover. Right? Shouldn't look like that. So backup is the last line of defense. I don't think it is. I think it's a lot more than that, right? So, and this is me as an ops guy saying this, right? There is IT event resilience, the ability to withstand hurricanes, IT misconfigurations, floods, and these are all things I've seen when I used to be on the IT side of the business. Then we have cyber resilience, and these both come together into operational resilience. They both have incident management, they have crisis management, you know, it also adds things like supply chain management in there and things like that. But these two things are basically two sides of the same coin, right? And the processes need IT and cyber to be joined together. IT resilience requires cyber because you're going to get downtimes of systems caused by cyber incidents, right? Cyber resilience requires IT. We require each other. Right? And I think backup is a secret weapon. Right? I think IT have to back up from a business continuity perspective, right? And we moan about our lack of visibility of systems. Right? I don't know what's happening. You know, I'm not engaged with the user. But one thing is for sure, even if it's not going in the CMDB, even if they're not deploying controls on it, if it's critical to the business, they'll be backing it up, right? Given. So if you can look inside your backups and identify the assets in there, they're probably the most important to the business, right? That's something to think about. So, you know, these are just some of the things I've found when I've gone into this company, I've understood what we do, and I've gone, okay, so if I have this data, what can I do with it? And I'm going to just give you some examples. And you can do this with a lot of data management products, right? The difference is, because I'm there and I'm going, this would be a brilliant idea if we productize this and we put it in the product and we offered it to our customers, we try and do some of these things. First thing is prioritize response, that BIA. Understanding what data is on what assets, what regulatory obligations that data has. Now, you could go out there and buy an agent that you have to configure login credentials on that logs into every box in the business and scans for it, or you could just look inside the backups and go, what data's in this database on this, in this Office 365 environment that's in this SharePoint server? Is it regulated? What access permissions does it have? So if you've got a load of credit card data, because we've got the file system, I can look at the file system permissions. So if you've got a file system with a load of credit card data on it, and it's wide open to the world, then you can discover that through backup. So, and you can export that data collected by the backup system, put it into your CMDB to augment it, or pump it into a SOAR to then prioritize your lead times for response and informing data subjects under things like GDPR and the US regulations. So I talked about that as well. So I've got your file system on your servers an hour ago, a day ago, 3 weeks ago, 5 days ago. Has someone gone into one of your ETC directories and changed the configuration? Well, I can tell you, right? Because I can see what your file system looked like over time. You could deploy a file system integrity monitoring solution to do it, another product, another agent, or you could use your backup to do that. So, you're starting to see the backup data is actually a really rich mine from a CISO perspective. We just never looked at it that way. It's just a boring thing that IT had. Set ransomware. If I got a file system now and a file system 2 days ago, has the entropy changed? Yeah, has the randomness in that file system changed? Has I can alert you and tell you it's being encrypted. So when the first year gets encrypted, you're notified and you can contain that machine. Also, wiper attacks. So if I know the amount of deletion events, because I've got point-in-time snapshots that happen on a system, I can tell if there's anomalous deletion events from your backup data without deploying an agent, without deploying another tool. I can pull binaries out, send them to VirusTotal, execute them in sandboxes so that you can see if they're malicious, create YARA rules of them, then take those YARA rules and then hunt for them across the backup data in the organization. So I find a malicious file in my Office 365, I send it to VirusTotal, it's bad, I can then take that, create a YARA rule, hunt for it in all of my backups to see which systems it's been in there, regardless of whether they're virtual, physical, cloud. Create forensics, right? A mutable file system, you can't change it. It's like having a write blocker on a system, right? If you've got a strong backup system, which is immutable, you can't change that file system. So you can do forensics, and you can copy multiple copies of that system and send it to different analysts in parallel. We never had this flexibility with traditional file-based forensics. And these ones I love. These are advanced use cases. But we can clone environments. So our job, when a system gets hit, is we instantiate a copy of that system. You don't need second infrastructure. So if a system gets hit, we literally move it to the cloud and start it up in our own cloud, right? So the customer can continue business. That's what the customer's ERP system did. And then they can come back, stand their systems back up, move it over that way. But because we built this capability to clone production environments, you can now create deception grids based on your production environments, or pen test copies your production environment heavily, because we don't normally let pen testers go full bore on our production environments. And also, test vulnerabilities in those things. It's like it's a capability that our platform gave me to do. I mentioned hunting passively. XDR, the person's compromised your box. You connect to an XDR agent. He knows you've connected to that XDR agent. He sees your network traffic. He'll see the increase in CPU. He knows you're onto you. But if you hunt against your backup data, the adversary doesn't see it. You can image those compromised systems in seconds, right? And then start up and distribute those copies. And then you hunt in those backups so you don't bring up those vulnerabilities and exploits. And Log4j. Everyone had Tenable, Rapid7, Qualys installed. and people still had pockets of log4j that they weren't scanning. But those systems were probably backed up. We got customers that looked for the log4j components, hunting across their backups, found them, and were able to take them down. And I like backup. Right? I didn't before. I fell asleep like that gentleman when I first went to work for a backup company. I went, I have to know what you do. It sounds dull. Right? But actually, since I've been there, I've realized the amount of security use cases that are there. So instead of deploying all these different agents out there and all this infrastructure, I can lower my cost and de-risk by just using all this data that's already in a data lake that is being supplied to me by IT. I don't even need to pay for it. IT are paying for the backup infrastructure, right? Just as a CISO. So I'm not selling to you because you don't need to pay for it. The IT department is already paying for it. So it's just look at your backup data anew with fresh eyes and think, what can I do with that backup data? So unfortunately, I've got to run off straight after this, but connect to me on LinkedIn if you've got any questions. I'll be glad to answer them there. Thank you.